Hello, Sackville. I hope you're doing very well. Welcome. System threats is the catchy title today, and this is a piece which this is a topic that more or less does turn up in some form every time. It's a very regular runner. Of course, you never quite know what's going to be there, but system threats. This is really all about what can threaten your computer and how can you prevent it, or how can you mitigate against the threat. And I'll jump in and talk a bit more about that sort of mitigation in a few minutes' time. So this is what we're after: threats to computer systems and networks, and thinking about how we can also limit or reduce the threat. Okay, well, limit or reduce mean the same thing. All right, what's it all about? So you need to, this is 1.4, by the way, and we'll jump into system software and operating system software next time. So we are looking at malware, at social engineering, e.g. phishing. I won't talk about farming, even though I've got it on my presentation, because it won't be in your exam. Brute force attacks, DDoS, data interception and theft, and the concept of an SQL injection. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are 6 different threats, and you need to understand what the threats are and how you can prevent or limit that threat from impacting your computer system. Right. How's the attack used, and what is the purpose of the attack? Now, the purpose of the attack I will deal with at this point, and they have rarely asked this in the exam, but the purpose of the attack could be any of the following. It could be for financial gain. In fact, it probably is for financial gain. I'm thinking about identity theft here. Another one, it could be a grudge against your employer or against somebody that you know. And of course, there are countless reasons. The other reason might be that it's an ideology thing. So, for example, if you believe that people shouldn't play computer games, you might launch an attack against Xbox because that is your fundamental belief. And of course, there are many flavors of people having ideologies that that might cross paths with a given company. Okay, it might be just to take a competitor down, which is what Xbox and PlayStation used to do to each other about 15 years ago. And I think they were paying hackers to do that. They'd never admit to it, but that's what we think was going on. So anyway, let's do a 10-minute teach. This really, just a little introduction to say to you that why is system security important? Well, the fact is, if you think about, for example, email, it's the primary means of communication. As a teacher, as a head of year, I get 120 to 140 emails every day. I'd be quite happy if they disappeared. Some companies require that they search the internet. A lot of companies do. And of course, currently, e-commerce, I'm quite surprised it's so low, represents 1/5 of all global retail. It's probably closer to 1/4 now. Okay, so we'll look now at what the threats are and how they can be limited or prevented, okay? This is a huge mind map, which I will send through to you. Mr. Valley Godfrey already has a copy of this, but this is pretty much what I'm going to be going through today. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, I just wanted to draw your attention to what it is. Cybersecurity are the methods, the ways to protect networks and computers. So we're going to look at cybersecurity methods to protect computers from and programs and data from damage or unauthorized access. And the unauthorized access obviously means people accessing things that they shouldn't be accessing, or they don't have the rights to access, okay? And when we talk about damage, we're talking about corrupting or deleting data, okay? So that's the sort of area we're looking at here. And when we talk about security threats, it's the methods that people employ to carry out a cyber security attack, all right? And it's often a malicious attempt to damage or disrupt a computer system or network, all right? And we're going to look at viruses, and we're going to look at, I don't know why spyware is there quite randomly, but what I want to draw your attention to is this word here, which is malware. Malware is the French for bad. So malware is like software, but it's badware. So it's stuff to do bad stuff to your computer, hence the word malware, a malintent, okay? Not a good intent. So let's kick off, first of all, with the first threat, which is worms, okay? So worms are worms, and these, all of these fall into the same category. That and let me put this on the screen for you so you can see it. If we let's do it with this, all of these fall into the same category. That this is malicious code. This is code designed to do bad things to your computer, okay? Malicious code. So they all fall into this category, right? So worms are the first type of malicious code we'll cover today. So the first thing is, just like viruses, worms are self-replicating. In other words, they make copies of themselves. So that's the first thing that a worm does, is that it makes copies of itself. Now, unlike a virus, a worm doesn't require a host program. So we're going to talk about viruses that, for example, are often spread using email. Email is an application. Email is a program, okay? So the point is, a worm doesn't actually need programs to work. It can just be let loose in a system. It makes copies of itself, and it sends copies of itself to other systems, okay? And it consumes bandwidth. I mean, that bandwidth is a measure of how quickly data can be moved, transmitted across a system in a given period of time. So, for example, with your BT or Virgin or whoever you've got your broadband account with, you pay for a particular amount of bandwidth, and that is how much data you can access, measured in megabits per second, over a given time. Second, usually, okay? So what does the worm do? It consumes bandwidth. So therefore, it really slows your computer down to a crawl. It can make it crash altogether. Worms are often used as part of a DDoS attack. And I'll come to DDoS later on. That's probably the most complex thing we'll cover today. All right. So that can often be used as part of a DDoS attack. Now we come on to the one everyone's heard of, which is namely the virus. Similar to a worm, it replicates, so it makes copies of itself, but this time it embeds itself, so it gets itself into, in other words, a host program. Email account being the most obvious. If it can embed itself in your Outlook or whatever your mail account is, that's a really good place for a virus to be. If you think about it, the most logical program to try to hide a virus where it can cause the most damage is your email account, because your email account is the one that you use to send emails to people. So therefore, in terms of the most ideal software to spread bad news, malware, malicious code, virus is perfect. Okay, so all of these are examples of malware. So the way it works is it replicates and it embeds into a host program. You download it first of all, usually without realizing it, and then it embeds in your program. Okay, and it could be any program, but email's a good example. And then when the host program is executed, in other words, when you open your email and you start to use it, that is when the virus will then be sent. It activates, all right? What does it do? It corrupts data and it deletes files. That's it. That's what a virus does. So those are really pared down the examples of what you need to know about viruses. Let's look at Adware next. Adware is very clever. Adware, you often recognize that there's annoying pop-ups that you get on your computer. But once Adware gets installed, it can be very difficult to get rid of. It tends to be irritating rather than dangerous. However, it can crash and slow your computer down because it's just very frustrating as it keeps these pop-ups keep happening. How it works is quite interesting because it accesses your browser history, so the the pages you've been looking at on Edge or Chrome or whatever your browser is, Safari. And then, based on that, it targets advertisements tailored to you. So it'll look at your browsing history and then it'll try and sell you stuff based on that. And of course, it will take a kickback from the sort of affiliated link. The way that a lot of YouTubers work is they'll give you a link to go and buy the product that they're reviewing, and then they'll get a slight discount from Amazon, but the YouTuber will get a kickback, will get a percentage, like 1%, or will get £2, £5 for each item that's sold. So that's how Adware works. It's very irritating. It tends not to be designed to crash systems, but it's just very annoying. It's just designed to sell you stuff, really, but it's frustrating. Then we've got this one, which is a different beast altogether, ransomware. Ransomware, again, it's malicious code and it infects your system. You can think about that for all three we've done so far. Virus, worm and ransomware, and Adware, same thing. Malicious code designed to infect your system. What does it do? It can lock and encrypt your files. It can encrypt your files. Locking and encrypting are the same things, okay? So it means that you are no longer able to access your files because your files have been encrypted. They've been locked. So you need to actually pay them money to get the password to unlock your decrypted or to decrypt your files. However, experience seems to be that when people do actually pay the ransom, which is not a wise thing to do ever, in fact, the passwords don't work. So you've not only lost all of your files, but you've also lost some money that you've paid to the attackers. So that's how ransomware works. I mean, there've been some very successful ransomware attacks. There was a couple of instances where US police agencies have suffered a ransomware attack and they've had to pay to actually get their files back, which is crazy when you think about it. So ransomware, another form of malicious code. So for all of these that we've just discussed, and that is worms, ransomware, adware, and viruses, for all of those, the mitigation, the way that you can prevent it or limit the damage, is to install anti-malware software. Examples you'll have come across, things like Norton, McAfee, so on. Okay, there are loads of examples of anti-malware software out there. It's worth just taking a minute to think about how anti-malware software actually works. So these companies, let's take Norton for example, they are looking out for new threats. Once they find a virus, they then write a virus definition. And this virus definition is, for example, it will contain information on the size of the virus, what it's called, etc., etc., etc. And you download that to your computer as part of your monthly subscription. Each time you log on, it checks for any new virus definitions. And you download these each time that you log on, if there are new ones. So this means it gives the software the opportunity to search for dangerous files before they enter your system. And then what it will do, it will quarantine them, which means it'll put them in a safe place within your computer where they can't cause any damage, and it will either delete them, quarantine them, and then give you a chance to delete them later on, okay? So what can you do? So you can, of course, you can install anti-malware software. You can also ban USB flash drives. We can't use those currently in my school because they're such an easy way to inadvertently introduce malicious code to a system. And you can also ban or limit access to certain websites. So all of these are ways of preventing or limiting. You can never prevent entirely, but all of these methods will limit the chances of you becoming infected, of your system becoming infected with a virus, okay? So transfer across network or from social media, okay? So that is a way that you can do that. Now, they may, and I want to just put this on the screen for you. Let's do it this way. I want to just introduce two concepts to you that you may or may not be aware of. And first of all, one is physical and the other one is logical. So I just wanted to get you into the idea that in terms of how you can go about limiting the damage, there's a physical way that you can do that, and there's a logical way that you can do it. So, for example, and it's better me doing it by examples, a physical way could be locking server room doors. Okay, that would be a physical way, literally a physical way of doing it. A logical way, well, there are many logical ways that you can do it, and of course, installing anti-malware or anit malware, as I had there. That would be a logical way. So logical ways are to do with your computer and software. Physical ways are things like security guards, those sorts of things. So if you get one of these questions and it's worth a few marks, you might in your head think, okay, can I think of a physical and can I think of a logical solution to this? Brilliant. Next. Trojan Horse. Now, a Trojan Horse is slightly different because a Trojan Horse is not actually a specific way of a specific means of attack. It's not like a virus or a worm where you can define exactly what it is. A Trojan Horse is more is more a way of delivering the payload. If you think about a bomber, an aircraft, a bomber, it delivers the payload, which is the bomb. So that's why I'm saying payload, okay? So for example, if a hacker wants to distribute malicious code, that code is called the payload, that malicious code, right? So that's the payload. A Trojan horse is a way of delivering it in a way that it appears benevolent. Now that word benevolent means that it appears to be a nice, useful thing, okay? Benevolent. So for example, an example of something that appears to be, helpful, useful and nice, but actually is anything but, would be a program that you might download which solves a problem for you. Perhaps it turns PDF documents into Word documents, or it can unlock a PDF document for you. Now, you might download that. It's free of charge. You use it. It does the job it wants to do. But what you don't realize is included in that piece of software is some malicious code, and that will sit on your computer doing damage. So Trojan Horse is often used in conjunction with a DDoS attack, which I know I've talked about a few times. It tends to be a standalone program, okay? And it causes issues when executed. So a Trojan Horse is more about how the malicious code is delivered. All right, so that's something slightly different there. Okay, buckle up. This is the most technical thing that I'm going to cover today, and it's the DDoS attack. Everyone's heard of DDoS, but do they actually know how it operates? So let me try and get into this and take you through all of the different steps of a DDoS attack. So let's say, for example, you want to take down a big company's server. Let's pick on IBM for no apparent reason, right? So first of all, what the hacker needs to get hold of, it needs to actually install, probably by using a Trojan, some kind of virus, some kind of malicious code on as many computers as possible. So what you might do is you might create a useful piece of software. You also pair it with some malicious code, some unpleasant code, some damaging code, and then you encourage users to download it. And this might get downloaded by 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 different people. And once you've done that, you as the hacker have basically acquired multiple computers. Okay, so your code is sitting on thousands of computers. So far, so good. Then you decide to launch the attack on, let's say, IBM servers. It could be anyone, okay? So what happens then? The zombies, by the way, are the computers who've got this code installed on them. So once that code's activated, it then launches an attack on a website, on a web server, and it's to try and bring the web server down. And it sends it huge numbers of requests. And a request is when you ask the web server to do something. But what they tend to involve is incomplete requests. So it's a bit like saying to someone, and try this because I find this quite entertaining in class. If I say to a student, it will send you an incomplete request like, what's your... And then I stop. And no matter what year I'm talking to, the student will go, sorry, what? Eh? What? And that's exactly what it does to the web server. It confuses it because it takes more time to deal with an incomplete request than it does with a complete request. So it's very difficult for the web server to handle that. And it takes up a lot of the server's resources trying to deal with these incomplete requests. And therefore, this massive increase in traffic, you might go from, I don't know, if you are IBM, if you're Microsoft, if you're Microsoft, you've probably got this one worked out by now. But if your website has been built to withstand 10,000 users, and suddenly 150,000 requests are being received every second, and incomplete requests, your web server, your system is not going to be able to cope. Ultimately, it will crash it. And when you do crash a system, if you've ever seen a sort of one of these systems when they've been broken into, it's then once it's been knocked over, which is a technical term, it sounds quite silly, doesn't it? Once a web server's been knocked over, it's then very easy to actually access the files in it, because this makes the server more vulnerable, and it's much easier to steal information. So that is your DDoS attack. They tend to use the DDoS as a way to sort out the sixes from the nines. It's one of the ways they can do it, because it's technically quite a difficult one to do. So just to recap all of this, it keeps the system busy so the users, and it means that the regular users can't access their data or their files. bombarding a website with data packets, incomplete requests, causes the system to crash because it means people can't access the system, and it can render a system useless. So those are the impacts of a DDoS attack. And I think we kind of covered quite well what a DDoS attack is for. Now, I would say what you should do, pick just this one, please. So it's that number 4, penetration testing, which is when you actually you put your system under pressure. You actually carry out a sort of your own tame attack. It's not the word I want. You carry out a limited attack, a planned attack, to see how good your system is to deal with it. So you do some pen testing, and you sort of, you try to simulate 100,000 computers attacking your system, and then based on what you get back from it, you then beef up your system in certain ways. Okay, so that's one. I mean, network forensics is for after the event. You would use monitoring software, and you would use a firewall as part of it, but the one which they give you the mark for is this guy here. If you ticked penetration testing and firewall, you'd get your mark, but if you only ticked firewall, because they're quite sneaky with this, you would not get your mark, because actually pen testing is what you should be doing. That's what will let you know how vulnerable your system really is. So that's the mitigation there for DDoS, okay? That's how you can limit it. You can't prevent it, you can limit it. Right, let's look at the man-in-the-middle attack. Now, the man-in-the-middle attack is usually carried out on a wireless network, and it works, and the aim is to intercept key data or sensitive data to sell it or to blackmail people or to use it for some kind of financial gain, all right? Now, how does it work? The hacker will possess some software called packet sniffing software. And for this to make sense, you need to understand that data moves around any system in packets. So you don't get massive, great files being sent in one chunk. You get little snippets of data being sent because it's far more efficient. All right. So the Tor system works in exactly the same way. Okay. Not the Tor system. It'll come to me. Tor is the onion router. No, it'll come to me. So what you use this software. You use packet sniffing software to intercept traffic as it goes past, used in a wireless network, like I said, and then this gives the hacker access to the communication path. The difficulty is that wireless transmission is not as secure as wired transmission. You could perform a man-in-the-middle attack on a wired network, but it's much harder because you've actually got to physically get into that system. That's quite a difficult thing to do. So what can you do to mitigate it? Well, the best thing that you can do is to use encryption. And encryption, as I covered last time, means turning plain text into ciphertext, one mark, to make the data unintelligible if intercepted. There's your second mark for that, okay? So we've talked about what a man-in-the-middle attack is, often on a wired network, intercepting packets using packet sniffing, and the way that you can prevent it is by encrypting the data. So that if people... Now, the other thing here is, and they do try and check on this, using encryption does not stop the data from being intercepted. The hacker will still intercept your data, but the point is, when they do intercept it, the data is useless because it's encrypted, and it takes a lot of effort, power, and time to decrypt encrypted files. Okay, SQL. Now, to do this SQL, let me start from here. We can forget about what it is for the time being. Let me just draw to. Let me just show you what I'm trying to do here. Let's go into our rectangle here. Let's do that. Okay. So if you imagine any database that you go into, say you've got an account, you will recognize these two boxes, right? One's a username and one is password. So every time that you go into a new website or you're trying to log into it, you've got to put in a username, you've got to put in a password. So this is a vulnerability. And SQL injection is a way of exploiting that vulnerability. Now, when you log into a website, you are very, very often, you're actually logging into a database. That's because a lot of websites are database driven. If people are selling things, there's going to be a database in there. A bank, it's just a database. So it's a database of transactions in the case of a bank. But in order to do that, in order to write databases, database queries are written using SQL. So SQL is a language used for writing questions for databases. So say, for example, if you worked in a shop, say you worked in HMV, and somebody came in and said, have you got an album by Pink Floyd in stock? I'm looking for Dark Side of the Moon. So the person behind the desk would go to the database, and they would perform a query, and they would type in a search to see, have we got Dark Side of the Moon in stock? Okay, so that's an example of a query. So the fact is, this query is written using SQL, which is structured query language, and you've got to do a couple of things with SQL in the exam. Okay, so SQL is used to look up data in a database. And what you've got to do if you want to carry out one of these is that you inject some code into one of the login fields. So, for example, into this field here or into this field here, you add some SQL code. And the purpose of that is for you to be able to gain higher level access or wider access to more users. So say, for example, if you could gain access to a bank's database, that means that you might be able to put some money into your account. If you can gain access to other people's accounts, that means you could steal their data. You could move funds around. You could order things from their account for you. You could do all sorts of stuff. You could perform identity theft. So an SQL injection means usually in a password field, so there's your password field, and it usually means with your password field, you're going to put your SQL query, and it'll be some code to try to actually gain access to that database, all right? So that is what an SQL attack is all about. So malicious SQL query inserted into an input field to gain unauthorized access to a database to try and destroy or delete data, okay? So that is the aim of an SQL attack. That is the purpose of an SQL attack. How can you limit this? Well, you can use input validation. Let's just draw a line around that, and that's the let's draw anything but a line around that. Let's try it again. Go away. God, drive me mad. Boom. Good. Okay. So you can use input validation, which is this guy here. And that means that you run a script, a piece of code, which looks at what people enter into the username or password field. Okay. So therefore, you can strip out any of the code that you know is likely to be SQL. And you've got various different ways of doing that we don't need to go into. But you can, so you can set up rules for what is and isn't allowed to be typed into those input fields. So that's what you do. Input validation, that is the magic answer that you're looking for there. Then we come to human beings as the weak point, okay? And this is entirely social engineering. So with social engineering, the idea here is that in any system, the weakest point are humans, because you can fool them, you can con them, you can trick them into giving away information, okay? So this is about trying to get people to make mistakes. Now, phishing is the example that you need to know for the exam. And phishing seeks to acquire sensitive information, data, etc. through tricking people into clicking a link on an email. So, for example, and I'm sure you get hundreds of these, I get loads of these. They mostly go into my junk file. Some don't. Some make it through on my email to my main email account. And that is, you get, for example, you get an email from what looks like your bank saying, someone tried to access your account, someone accessed your account from Bolivia this afternoon. If this wasn't you, click here immediately and reset your password. So you think, my money will get missing. You click on the link, you put in your username and password, and before you thought about it, that has been stolen. And then suddenly you don't have access to your account anymore. They get into your account. They can lock your account. They can lock you out of it, and then you have to spend a lot of time on the phone to call centres to try to get your money back, or to try to stop them from stealing your money. Okay, so that is how social engineering works. I'm not going to talk about farming because it will not be in your exam. Oop. That was a bit crazy. So what can you do? what can you do to limit it? You can't prevent it because fraudsters, tricksters are always trying to make money out of people who are easily fooled. But you can train staff to recognize and look out for phishing scams. You can also ban access to certain websites because certain websites are likely to try to trick you more. The more the websites offer to give you something for free, the higher the likelihood that they're trying to steal stuff from you. I'm moving at speed. Brute force attack. A brute force attack is a trial and error attack to hack into your account. So we talked before, didn't we, about most accounts, I say most accounts, every account you ever try logging into, it's got two fields just like this, a username and a password. So the way that a brute force attacks works is this. The hacker has downloaded a special custom version of an online dictionary. They will then try to attack your node. They will try to get into your account, and they will use a combination of thousands or hundreds of thousands of usernames and passwords to try and get you in. And of course, this is why they encourage people not to use passwords like dog or cat, because they're very easy to guess. And in an online dictionary, that can be done in a fraction of a second, because it's a very fast way of checking all the dictionary words. And then dictionary words with combinations of letters, again, very easy to do. And a piece of software can do this hundreds of thousands of times a minute, okay? So there we go, thousands of combinations a minute. So a brute force attack, if you haven't got a good password, can be incredibly easy to get into a computer. I mean, you think about the number of routers, the number of nodes that have got a default password. Like, I mean, think about your set-top box. Have you ever changed your password from 1234 or 0000? A lot of people don't. So therefore, that's the first thing the hacker would try. Mitigation. How can you prevent that from happening? The first thing is think about passwords. A minimum of 8 characters or long passwords would be enough to say in the exam. And secondly, a combination of lowercase, uppercase and special characters. You do this each time you create an account. It's exactly what happens. Don't use dictionary words. There's another one. And then this one, which is very effective, banks all use this, is that it'll give you 3 chances to get into your account. And after that, it'll lock it. And you've got to make a phone call and you've got to prove who you are before you can regain access to your account. You could also use biometric access method. That's a physical method. All the rest of these were logical. So biometric would be a physical method of locking people out. Another physical method could be smart card access method. 2-factor authentication could work well as well, okay? So that is what a brute force attack is. It's a repeated attempt to log into a system by using different combinations of usernames and passwords. Good. This screen isn't doing very much. Let's go back one. Okay, so we have made it to 1902. Now, this is exactly half an hour, and I'm not going to go through the quizzing because I'm not going to quiz myself. So you can do the quizzing on your own time, but I will see you in exactly 1 week's time, and we can run through the next topic. And next time we're going to look at system software. Bye-bye.